The Basement Tenant, a novel, written by L.Z. Sinclaire, narrated by L.Z. Sinclaire. The sounds came on a Wednesday night, and they were different. Not voices, not conversation, something else, rhythmic, muffled, undeniable, a cadence that Carrie's body recognized before her mind did, the way you recognize music from another room, not the melody, but the pulse, a tempo, a breath pattern, the particular acoustics of two bodies in motion, separated from her by nothing but a century of wood and plaster. She was in bed. She'd been trying to sleep, an act that had become less a biological function and more a performance she put on for herself, lying in the dark with her eyes closed, breathing evenly, pretending that the stillness outside meant stillness inside. It was 1:17 a.m. She knew the time because she looked at her phone, and she knew she'd looked at her phone because she'd heard something, and she knew she'd heard something because her body had gone very still in that particular way, alert, held, the blood rerouting from her extremities to somewhere central and primal. She lay there. The sounds continued, low and persistent, traveling through the bones of the house, the way all sounds traveled in this building, not through the air, but through the structure itself, through the joists and the subfloor and the plaster, so that what reached her was not a sound so much as a vibration, a frequency she felt as much as heard. She should put in earplugs. She should take the Ambien. She should do any of the things a reasonable, well-adjusted woman would do when confronted with the unremarkable fact that her adult tenant was having sex in his own apartment. She put her hand on the railing at the top of the stairs. She didn't remember getting out of bed. She didn't remember crossing the room. She was simply there at the top of the stairs in her bare feet and her faded Northwestern t-shirt, her hand on the smooth wood of the banister, and the sounds were closer here. One floor closer, the house's acoustics funneling them upward through the stairwell like a chimney drawing heat. She stood there. She didn't go down. She didn't go back to bed. She stood on the landing in the dark listening, and her breathing changed, not faster, but deeper, as if her lungs were trying to accommodate something her mind hadn't agreed to yet. It lasted maybe 10 minutes, maybe less. Time had become unreliable. Then the sound softened, fragmented, stopped. Silence, the particular silence of aftermath, weighted and warm, different from the empty silence of a house at night. Carrie went back to bed. She lay in the dark and put her hand on her sternum and felt her heartbeat under her palm, rapid and insistent, and she thought, this is not about him. This was about the fact that no one had touched her in 14 months. This was about a body that had been shut down so completely by medication, by fear, by the relentless performance of stability that the sound of someone else's intimacy had found the one crack in the wall and poured through it like water. She didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and pressed her hand against her chest, and the house ticked and settled around her, and she thought about nothing and everything and the specific shape of Elias's hands when he folded a shirt. In the morning, she went to the laundry room, not because she had laundry, because the laundry room was the only shared space that required crossing into the basement's territory, and she needed, in a way she could not have explained to Beth, or her therapist, or anyone operating within the perimeter of reason, to be in a space that was adjacent to him. Not his apartment, not the kitchen, the in-between place, the room that belonged to neither of them, where the rules were ambiguous and the proximity could be explained as practical. She was sorting a basket of Miles's school shirts, all white, all identical, the uniform of a system that erased individuality and called it equality, when the basement door opened and Elias was there. He was barefoot, sweatpants, no shirt. The sight of him hit her body before it reached her mind, the dark expanse of his chest, the lean architecture of his torso, the way his skin absorbed the harsh fluorescent light and returned something warmer. He was holding a coffee mug. He stopped in the doorway. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't realize you were..." "It's fine. Shared space." He nodded. He didn't leave. He leaned against the door frame, the same door frame she leaned against 2 weeks ago, the night she'd found him folding shirts, the night the Sinclaire had happened. And the symmetry of it felt deliberate, though she knew it wasn't, knew that he was simply a man in a doorway, and she was a woman with a basket of shirts, and the space between them was 4 feet of linoleum and an ocean of everything neither of them had said. She turned back to the shirts. He moved past her to the dryer, his dryer load from the night before, she realized, still sitting in the drum. He reached around her, not over her, not past her, around her, his arm crossing the space between the washer and the dryer in a trajectory that required him to pass within inches of her back. She felt the heat of him, not a metaphor, actual heat, the thermal output of a human body at close range, and her hand stopped moving on the shirts. He pulled his clothes from the dryer. He stepped back. The whole interaction lasted 4 seconds. Neither of them acknowledged it. They sorted laundry in silence side by side in a room the size of a walk-in closet, and the air between them was so charged that Carrie could feel it on her skin like weather. He finished first. He said, "Have a good day," and left. And she stood in the laundry room holding one of Miles's white shirts and breathing the air where he'd been and thinking, "I am in so much trouble." Later, after the laundry, after she'd stood under a shower that was too hot and pressed her forehead against the tile and told herself firmly that she was an adult with a custody case and a mortgage and a prescription for Lexapro, and she was not going to develop an obsession with a man who lived in her basement, he was in the kitchen. He'd come up through the interior door, the one she'd latched, but the latch with a hook and eye, nothing serious, and she realized she'd forgotten to latch it the night before. He was making coffee. He'd brought his own, a bag of something dark and expensive looking, the kind of coffee that came from a place with a story. He stood at the counter with the ease of a man who was comfortable in kitchens, who had learned to be comfortable in spaces that weren't his. "Good morning," he said. Again, because it was still morning, because they kept finding each other in the same hours, because this house was making proximity into a routine. She couldn't look at him. She felt the blood rise to her face, the specific betrayal of a body that refused to keep its owner's secrets. And she turned to the refrigerator and opened it and stared at the contents as if selecting a yogurt required her full intellectual capacity. "Morning," she said to the eggs. "I made coffee. There's plenty if you want some." "I have my own, thanks." She could feel him noticing. The journalist in her, the old her, the sharp one, understood this. Elias was a reader of signals. He'd noticed her flushed face, her avertive A's, the rigid set of her shoulders. He was processing the data, reaching a conclusion. He didn't mention it. That was worse. He poured his coffee, said, "Have a good day," and went back down to the basement. The interior door closed softly behind him. Carrie stood in the kitchen holding a yogurt she didn't want and waited for her face to cool. The end. You have been listening to The Basement Tenant, written by L.V. Sinclaire, narrated by L.V. Sinclaire. Thank you for listening.